Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 3 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and knock this out. Alright, first question. Deadlifts, squats, power cleans, and push presses. I do them all in one workout, alternating 2 days of deadlift and 1 day of squats. What order should I do them in? Deadlift and squat first, or power cleans, push presses first? Thanks, brother. Man, that's kind of a tough question. Honestly, I would absolutely not try to do power cleans after deadlifts if you're trying to be really strong on them. What I would say on your squat days, go ahead and do your squats first. Always squat first on any day when you're going to squat. I've just always found that to be ideal, and most coaches out there have too. I am going to say, though, that your power cleans are going to be tough after that, particularly if you've done any sort of volume squatting. That's a problem I ran into with my own concurrent training. Power cleans after doing any sort of volume squats, your strength is going to go down tremendously. On a heavier squat day that's lower volume, you can probably get away with it. As far as all the rest of that goes, also, any sort of standing overhead press, just like I've programmed it for years, and the way I do it personally, needs to be done before deadlifts. And I find that it doesn't negatively impact my own deadlift performance meaningfully. Not so much as squats do. So I would say on your deadlift days, go ahead and do the other lifts first and then deadlift last. And the deadlift's probably going to be the last thing you do in the gym that day. On any day where you've done other barbell work and then you deadlift, your last set of deadlifts, you're probably going to walk out the door. You're going to be done. But in my own experience, the only thing that really seems to negatively impact deadlift performance is going to be squatting first. But even for me right now on my deadlift day, I personally, at this point, I'm actually squatting and doing a strict press before I deadlift, and I'm finding it's just fine. But you're going to find it the other way around. After you deadlift, your overhead pressing is going to be a problem. So that's how I would organize it personally. So hopefully that helps and gives you some ideas. All right, next question. Hey Jason, what's the best way to train for beltless lifts such as a squat and deadlift? Should you just do them lighter and beltless, or do you need to do specific strength and tightness exercises for the core? Keep those videos coming, man. No, you don't need to do anything special there. You just perform the exercises. You just have to learn how to brace your core more effectively when you do them, and you're probably going to use less weight. But that's because you're just not going to be quite as strong. Now, for me, I personally don't use a belted deadlift. I've never been comfortable with the belt on deadlifts. No matter how many times I've tried to do it over the years, I can't make it work. I don't like it. It doesn't work for me. Squats, I simply gain strength out of the belt. You know, at least 10 pounds out of the belt is what I get, if not more. That's just me personally. A lot of guys get a lot more than that out of the belt. But for me, the difference is just bracing my core more. You don't really train differently. I don't program it any differently. If I'm personally doing beltless versus belted squats and I rotate in the belt, I'd continue with the same programming. Again, it's just that it's easier to stay upright with the belt. With a belt, it is easier to keep your torso upright. It's easier to have less forward lean because it's easier to brace your core against the belt. You just have to learn to stay tighter without it. And that's all there is to it. All right, next question. Is touch and go bench a useless exercise? Most high school and collegiate athletes never pause bench unless they're a powerlifter. Also, if someone were to desire the classic look or didn't have trouble growing their pecs, would they be better off doing touch and go bench given their form in the same movement pattern as a pause bench, but they acquire the muscle stretch reflex in their chest? Thank you for your opinion, Jason. No, I'm usually of the opinion that pause benching is all around better. I mean, there might be times when you don't pause bench, when you don't care about your chest as much, but that's the only real difference. I feel like touch and go de-emphasizes the pecs just a little bit. But it also doesn't help you build as much starting strength. Now, what I will say, the scenario you described is relatively rare. You don't see that many guys who really build massive chests versus their shoulders. In fact, I usually see the opposite. I see more guys who, if they use the bench press as their primary lift, if they don't pause bench, that they're in the other direction. And I mean, I remember seeing a guy like that just a few months ago, back when I was training at the gym that I was filming at a while back. There was a younger guy there, NPC guy, I was chatting with him, who he actually had the opposite problem, and he was doing sets of 5 with 315 on the bench touch and go. He still struggled with his chest development, had a lot of pectorals, struggled with chest. So it's unlikely to see it that way. The majority of people are the other way, although if that's the situation you're in, you're not going to compete in powerlifting. Your chest grows really easily from the bench press, even touch and go. By all means, go ahead and do it that way, but you're basically just going to get more deltoid involvement in my experience. It is what it is. All right, next question. Hi, Jason. I'm somewhat confused about the long head of the triceps. I'm doing a lot of close grip pressing, close grip bench, overhead press, log clean and push press, incline, close grip bench. I'm not doing any tricep isolation exercises. Now, am I missing out on some triceps long head gains? Well, it really depends. It sounds like you're doing a couple of different overhead lifts, so you may not be missing out on it. It's mostly just the chest presses that tend to put more focus on the lateral and medial head of the triceps. And if you just look at the way the muscle works, it said that you need a certain amount of shoulder rotation in order to get the long head. But if you look at a lot of overhead pressing, particularly standing, and the reason I say standing is based upon the EMG data as far as tricep involvement goes. The standing lifts seem to recruit more tricep than when you do seated. And since you're doing a push press, you're doing like log clean and presses, all this stuff, you're probably getting sufficient long head stimulation as long as your volume is high enough to get that stimulation that you want. And it just has to do with the way that the long head is recruited. And I would say, again, if you're doing a fair amount of volume, and since you listed that you're doing 2 different standing overhead lifts, I bet you're probably getting enough volume. So you could look at that, look at it in the mirror, just look at your overall balance. If your whole tricep looks like it might be lagging, particularly the upper half, then the long head might not be getting enough stimulation. You could consider an isolation movement at that point, or you could just get a lot stronger on those push presses and everything. And just remember, if the push press itself is actually a good potential weak point builder for that, because you get that eccentric overload on it. So again, you're doing the right things. I don't think you're going to have a problem. As long as you get really strong on those exercises, you should be fine. And the thing to remember is that when you compare yourself to others, you might be saying, well, this other guy, I trained with, because you're doing a lot of strongman stuff, it sounds like, might have bigger triceps, and you're going, well, maybe I need to do something else. But then you realize that he can out push press you by 75 pounds. And it's like, well, put another 75 pounds on your push press, and that deficiency between he and you might go ahead and disappear. All right, next question. And this will most likely be the last question of the week. Hey coach, is prolonged muscle twitching a cause for concern? A muscle in my arm has been going off for the last 3 days. Could it be a deload / deficiency issue? You know what, that could be all sorts of stuff going on. It could be a lot of things going on causing that. You could have a pinched nerve, and if it's in your arm, that's always an indicator of potentially a pinched nerve. So maybe look into that. Is your shoulder hurt? Are you sleeping on it poorly? Are you sleeping on your shoulder wrong? Are you getting any numbness or tingling in the arm going with it? Things like that. That's the stuff I would look at first. And if you're experiencing those things, go talk to your doctor about it. Potential medical issue. You could have a pinched nerve or something. Or you could just be sleeping on it wrong. Now, if it's a potential overuse or overtraining issue, it's going to depend on, again, what your training looks like. Usually muscle cramping that's lasting any period of time is usually indicative of getting on the edge of overtraining, chronic overreaching. So at a certain point, you need to start looking at your training volume, your training loads. Because it's in an arm, it sounds more localized rather than a total systemic. So that's what I would consider. Also start looking at your training, see if there's something going on with that, and you need to go ahead and take a deload. Start looking for other signs of overtraining as well. And it could just be a minor overuse issue in that area, in which case just reducing volume for a short bit and wait for any of your arm exercises, and that will include pressing and pulling. Deload those a little bit and see if it goes away. But the first thing I would look for is definitely look at how you're sleeping on it. think about pinched nerves. Are you getting numbness and tingling or just cramping? If it's just cramping, very possibly overuse and early signs of potential chronic overreaching, which eventually becomes overtraining. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.